Happy Saturday! This is Natalie from Sparks of Joy Studio. Let's get into these projects. For our first project, I have this sign that I picked up at the thrift store for 96 cents. And we're going to start out by painting it completely in cast iron by Fusion. Once that was done, I came in with this Typesetting Stamp set by IOD, and I'm going to be stamping on the word vintage. So we're going to put all of the letters on to the piece first to kind of space it out, make sure it's in the right position where I would like it. And then I'm going to put it onto my thin mount, and I'm going to be using some white IOD ink to stamp it on since we are stamping onto a darker surface. I then took the I in the letter set and just stamped on a dot at the end of the word, just to give it a little bit more, I don't know, pizzazz or make it look a little different, more unique. I set it aside to dry just to make sure I didn't smear any of the ink, and then I came back later and distressed back just on the edges of the sign with some 220 grit sandpaper. So I'm going to be going all around the piece, and the great thing about this sign is that it actually has so many ridges from the original sign that was on there that I'm able to actually distress back in multiple parts, and the furthest in, that little edge, the furthest in, actually came out with that little bit of the blue that was underneath, whereas the rest of it came out with the wood color. So this is all I did to this piece. I really liked how it turned out, and let's take a look at that finished project. For our next project, we will be upcycling this handmade pen and notepad holder. Now I'm going to be getting some amazing resin. This sets up in about 10 minutes, and I'm going to be pouring several of the molds from the Virdis set. It's a mold from IOD's 2024 spring release. So you saw me go in, I mixed together parts A and B in equal parts, and now I'm going to be pouring it into several of the molds, just using up the amount of resin that I had made. I begin to pull this casting out of its mold prior to it being fully set and hardened because I want to be able to kind of mold it around the piece at the bottom. So I'm going to be slowly bringing it up, being very careful because there will be pieces that are still sticky and I will have to kind of adjust that on the piece. And then we're going to be taking that and we're going to be putting it around the base of this piece, right where that notepad holder would be. Then I take one of the smaller pieces from the mold and I'm going to be placing it in the top right corner. I apologize, it's out of frame, but you will see it in a second. I glued the two pieces on and then I let that sit overnight. And now I'm coming in with Picket Fence by Fusion and painting on the second and third coats. After that paint was dry, I came in with Fusion's Antiquing Glaze, and I am going to be brushing it on to the entire piece, allowing it to sit for a few minutes, and then wiping back the excess. Hi everyone, this is Natalie with Sparks of Joy Studio. I know that you rarely see my face on screen in my videos, but I wanted to pop on here real quick to let you know about our 30% off the 30th of every month special. So beginning this month on the 30th, everything on my website will be 30% off. So make sure you take a look now, see what you might want. I can't promise it'll be there on the 30th, but ideally that's the goal, is for you guys to get some great discounts, and just be prepared for that the rest of
this year at least. So, I also have a couple of other surprises for you, but this is the only one I'm sharing today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon.
For our next project, I have this little sign that I got at the thrift store for $1.46, and I am going to be starting by covering up the text that is on that drop cloth or that burlap that has been adhered onto the sign in the middle. So we're going to very lightly do a coat of white on just those pieces and then come in, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this because I really liked the drop cloth, but I knew that the only way that I would be able to make this piece the way that I wanted it was to either paint the drop cloth or replace it. And replacing it wasn't an option because it was a fully adhered to the wood that's underneath. Once I had finished painting it with several coats of a creamy white paint, I came in with a 220 grit sandpaper and lightly distressed all of the edges on the frame. Now I'm taking Dark and Decrepit Liquid Patina by DIY, and I'm going to be painting the entire frame around the outside. I don't know if you can tell from this picture, or this clip, but the inside part of that frame is painted in a gold. I did put the liquid patina over that as well. It does look a little bit different, but you'll see when I move on to the next step, this is something that did not inhibit like the beauty of the piece in the end, I guess. Now I'm going to be taking an antiquing glaze by Fusion, and I'm going to be covering the entire piece all the way around the frame as well as over the painted drop cloth that we have in the middle. I still don't know if it's drop cloth or if it's burlap, so please feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Now I'm going to be taking this lovely blue flower from the Brocante IOD transfer set, and I'm going to be transferring it on to the piece. I'm not sure if you remember, but this piece originally was horizontal. My plan for it is for it to be displayed vertically. I had cut this piece up because it was going to be used on another project, and then I never ended up using it. So I knew after doing that, I had to quickly use this transfer, or else it might dry out and not be able to be used. At least that's something I've noticed with some of my transfers. If I leave them for a bit of time after potentially using them, that they end up not working for me as well. So I am going to transfer this on, putting it back together, and then we will move on to the next step. Now I'm going to be using the Birdsong Mould by IOD and some air dry clay to create these, or to make these two birds that I will be putting onto the framed piece that we are working on. I am using IOD air dry clay, which I personally find to be the easiest to use. I've tried a couple different ones. I'm definitely not a pro. I'm very new to using clay, but this one has been my favorite so far. I also want to mention that when you are using these molds, it is very important to use cornstarch or brush some cornstarch onto the molds or into the molds first before you use any clay, because it allows it to come out of the mold much more smoothly. It allows it to keep all of that detail. If you are casting with resin, you do not need to worry about the cornstarch step. Before I get out my glue and adhere these on, I'm trying to figure out the best placement. And now that I have found it, I will be getting my Titebond wood glue. It's the Quick and Thick, sorry, Titebond Quick and Thick. And I will be gluing these two birds onto this piece. I do want to mention that because the clay is still wet, I am not being super duper picky about the exact positioning of these birds. I do not want to mess with them too much until they are dry. Well, I don't want to mess with them at all. But because they're not dry, I want to make sure that I am not trying to manipulate them too much. So I do just lay it down, make sure that the wings are positioned and the tail's positioned where I want, and then I let it be. Here's a look at the finished project. For my next project, I grabbed these two items from my stash. One was a metal candle holder that I gotten about a year ago, and then this other piece I either thrifted on my own or I had gotten it from, I think maybe from a whatnot sale from Upcycle by Brie. I honestly cannot remember. Anyway, I'm going to be taking some Gorilla Glue and gluing these two pieces together. I am gluing that metal piece to what was the base of this candlestick. A question I recently got from a viewer was about the my choice of glue. They had noticed that I had used both or Gorilla Glue. I've used Type Bond, Quick and Thick. I have used E6000. I don't think I use that one as much in my videos, but they wanted to know, if there was an easy way of deciding which one to use. I will say that my personal preference is to use Gorilla Glue for any projects that I want to be adhered very sturdy and that I do have time to allow it to sit and dry because Gorilla Glue does need to sit overnight before you use it again. Um, right now, you see me coming in with a metallic bronze by Fusion, and I'm going to be painting the entire candlestick on this piece. Okay, so back to glue. I will use Type Bond Quick and Thick when I want a project to be done quickly or to be ready for me to work on it again quickly because Type Bond only takes about 10 to 30 minutes for it to set enough so that you can continue working on it. That's why I will use it. And I also will use it when I am putting embellishments on a piece because they're not going to be something that's going to be messed with too much. When you need to do feet or uh, something on the base of a planter or on the base of wood, that's a little bit different than when you are putting an embellishment like a mold or something else onto a piece that isn't really going to be touched or manipulated very much. Although I had seen E6000 used quite often when I first began watching crafting videos on YouTube, I personally have not had much success with it. It is very tricky, I guess. You can't really use it if you already have a painted surface. It does not adhere certain kinds of materials. I've had the best success with it, and so I'm using the rest of what I have when I am gluing glass on glass or ceramic on ceramic or a ceramic on glass. Once that metallic bronze is dry, I'm going to be taking some dark wax. I apologize, this is black wax by DIY, and I'm going to be wiping onto the entire piece and wiping back the excess just to give it a little bit more of an aged effect. I also decide to wipe some of that black wax onto the metal piece that is glued onto the top both on the inside where that rusty metal is, as well as around the side where you see the gold. I'm adding in this greenery that I got from Julie at Julie's Designs and Signs, and we are done. I went back into my stash for our next project. I have this a teapot that I had thrifted. The lid was missing, so I only had the base, but I thought it would make a really cute vase or planter for spring. I am painting it with Blue Pine by Fusion, and I'm going to be painting the entire piece except for the handle. Now I'm going to be pulling out the olive crest mold and my air dry clay and casting the label in the middle of this mold set. When I pulled the label out, I noticed that there were some extra little, I don't know, jagged pieces that were on the end of clay, and I'm just very lightly tapping them in to allow this to look a little bit more finished before placing it on. Now I'm going to be taking my Type Quick and Thick while my label is still wet and wiping it all over the back of the label until I get to all the edges. And then I'm going to be transferring it and gluing it onto the middle of that teapot. While that clay is still wet, I do decide to come in with a stamp from the Antiquities stamp set, and I do put some black IOD ink on the stamp first, and then make an impression of the stamp into that label that we've created. Here's our finished project. And if for some reason you do not like the label part of this, you can always flip it around. So it is a reversible piece. Next, I have this wooden pencil holder that I got at Goodwill, at the regular Goodwill. And I'm going to start by putting these little spools on the bottom as feet. And as you can see, I am using the Type Bond Quick and Thick on this one, but I am gluing wood to wood, and I am trying to get something done quickly. So I wanted the quick set wood glue. I put that aside for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I came back in and began painting just the sides and the back with the color, I believe this is Chateau by Fusion. I had originally thought about painting the front, but I thought that that hand painted little pair of cows and the florals were really cute. And I also liked that it said mom and then the year 1999. Um, I just think with Mother's Day coming up and the fact that 1999 was the year I graduated from high school, I don't know. I just really wanted to leave it as is. So I kept on painting and realized that maybe this color wouldn't be the best to go with the cows that I decided to leave on the front. So after taping up the front part that with the cows on it, I came back in with Conservatory, and I'm going to be painting that Conservatory, which is also by Fusion, and painting the sides, the back, and the inside of this pencil holder. I keep calling it a pencil holder because that's what I envision it being now, but I forgot when I originally purchased this, it came with a salt and pepper shaker inside, which I will definitely show you in a future video because I actually kept them to the side because my plan for them is probably to turn them into something to hold greenery. I'm not sure yet. So they're kind of sitting in my stash waiting for the next idea, I guess. I am going to go ahead and finish painting this up, and then we're going to move on to the next step. Once that paint was dry, I came in with the color Wellington by Fusion, and I'm going to be painting just the feet on this piece. Once I had painted 2 coats of that Wellington on all the feet and let it dry, I came back with a 220 grit sandpaper and did a very light distressing on all of the edges of this pencil holder. And here is a look at our finished project. As I was looking at this piece, I thought about making it reversible too. So we are actually going to go back to the craft room and get out our air dry clay and cast some of these molds from the Toadstool molds by IOD. Once I was done casting all of those mushrooms and positioning them how I liked, I glued them on while they were still wet, and then I came back in with clear glaze by Fusion just to ensure that they didn't crack as they dried. And here is a look at our new and improved finished project. For our final project, I'm going to be taking two thrifted items and bringing them together. I have this wooden base and then these spice containers that were part of this rack. Now, the spice container or the spice rack only had 5 of the containers, so I wanted to see how I could use those. As I was looking at this wooden piece, I thought about how I could use those spice containers on it, but the top of it had kind of an extra layer of almost like a rack on that side. So I flipped it upside down and then I took my 5 containers and they fit perfectly across that wood piece. Before I paint that base, I wanted to make sure I sanded the entire top. It had a little bit of a seal on it. And then also I wanted to make sure that I got rid of as much of the label that you see there as I could. Now I'm painting the entire base in Pitch Black by Paint Couture. This is part of their all-in-one line, so it does have a built-in primer and sealer. I let that paint dry and distressed the edges. Now I'm going to take the 5 containers and I'm going to be using my Gorilla Glue to adhere all 5 of them to the top of this wood plank. Now I'm going to be using the Frames IOD mold and some of the air dry clay by IOD, and I'm going to be casting this oval frame that's in the middle of that bigger frame. I need 3 castings in order to complete the idea that I have in mind here. I wanted to find a way to create a place to put labels on the containers. So I'm going to be casting these molds to do that. However, one of the challenges that I have is that the container is in a shape that this frame and none of the other frames or other things that the other molds that I have in my stash are the right size. They're either too long or too big. So my idea here is to cast 3 of these ovals and then I'm going to be cutting them in half and placing them in unique positions on those containers. Before I move on to the next step, I'm replacing my IOD air dry clay into this Ziploc bag, as well as a damp paper towel just to keep it um, wet enough that it's moldable the next time I want to use it. And I'm also making sure that I take out as much of the air from the bag as I can. I've had a lot of success with this storage method for my clay. I've had open containers of air dry clay by IOD last for months using this method. I let my glass containers and that base dry overnight, and now I'm coming in with the 3 molds that I cast, and I'm going to be slicing them in half using this paint scraper. Now I'm taking those molds and I'm going to be positioning them in alternating spots. So one will come down from the top half of the container, the next one will come down from or come up from the bottom of the container, and so on till I get to the other side. Once I'm happy with how that looked, I'm coming in with my Titebond Quick and Thick and gluing on all of those labels. While the clay was still wet, but after all of the pieces were glued on, I came in with Clear Glaze by Fusion, and I am going to be sealing all of them to prevent any cracking. Here's our finished project. This is actually going to be a gift for a friend of mine who wanted to use this to hold some school supplies, some paper clips, erasers, and things. And that was why I really wanted to make sure I found a way to put a something so that she could make labels. I'm really hoping she likes this finished project, and I hope that you've enjoyed all of the projects that we've done today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.